The night was quiet. The only sound in the room was Mark's slow, steady snoring. Beside him, his wife Kizzy lay half asleep, drifting in and out of dreams. Then, without warning, a sharp sound cut through the silence. Ring, ring, ring. Kizzy's eyes fluttered open. She turned toward the bedside table and saw Mark's phone vibrating. The glowing screen showed the time, 12 a.m. A frown crossed her face. Who would call at such an hour? She leaned closer, and then she saw the name flashing on the screen. Sugar. Her eyebrows knitted together. She had never heard Mark mention anyone by that name. It didn't sound like a work contact or a family member. It sounded personal. She glanced at Mark. He was still fast asleep, completely unaware of the ringing. The call didn't stop. Whoever Sugar was, they were desperate to speak to him. Kizzy hesitated, her heart beating faster. Something told her to ignore it, but curiosity and a strange sense of fear pushed her to act. She picked up the phone. "Hello," she said softly. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a woman's voice came through, low, shaky, and urgent. "Mark, please. You promised me. You can't leave me like this. I'm at the place. It's cold. And he's coming." Kizzy's grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this?" she asked. The woman's voice sharpened instantly. "Who are you?" "I'm his wife," Kizzy replied, her voice unsteady. There was a sharp gasp, and then the line went dead. Kizzy slowly lowered the phone, staring at her husband's peaceful face. He looked like a man without a single worry. But Kizzy's heart told her otherwise. That midnight call was not just strange, it was dangerous. And whatever it meant, her life was about to change forever. Kizzy lay awake long after the call ended. The words of the strange woman replayed in her mind. "I'm at the place. It's cold. And he's coming." She couldn't understand what it meant, but it didn't sound good. By 5 a.m., she had barely slept. Mark stirred beside her, stretching and yawning like a man who had nothing to hide. "Morning, babe," he said with a smile. Kizzy forced a smile back. "Morning." She waited until he was halfway to the bathroom before she asked casually, "Who's Sugar?" Mark froze for a split second, but quickly recovered. He turned to face her, eyebrows raised. "Sugar? I don't know any Sugar." Her eyes narrowed. "Your phone rang last night. The name said Sugar. A woman answered when I picked it." Mark laughed, too quickly. "Ah, Kizzy, you know these scammers. They save their names as funny things to make people curious. I don't know any Sugar. Maybe she dialed a wrong number." But Kizzy wasn't convinced. She remembered the way the woman spoke, the urgency in her voice. That was no scammer. Still, Kizzy kept quiet. Arguing wouldn't give her answers. She watched as Mark got dressed for work, humming softly as if nothing had happened. When he left the house, Kizzy's heart was restless. She picked up his phone from the table, where he had forgotten it while rushing out. Her fingers shook as she scrolled through his call history. Sugar was gone. Not just a call from last night. There was no trace of any number saved under that name. Kizzy's stomach tightened. He had deleted it. Outside, the morning sun was shining, but inside Kizzy's heart, a dark cloud was forming. She knew one thing for sure. Mark was hiding something, and she was going to find out what it was. That afternoon, Kizzy couldn't focus on anything. The words from the strange woman still echoed in her mind. "I'm at the place, it's cold, he's coming." Who was coming? And why did she sound so scared? By evening, Mark returned from work looking tired. Kizzy studied his face, trying to read him, but his expression gave nothing away. While they were eating dinner, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was lying face down on the table. Kizzy noticed how quickly he grabbed it, glancing at the screen before pressing the side button to silence it. "Who was that?" she asked calmly. "No one important," Mark replied, forcing a smile. "Just work matters." Kizzy pretended to accept his answer, but her instincts screamed otherwise. She had learned long ago that Mark was a terrible liar. He avoided eye contact and tapped his foot whenever he wasn't telling the truth. And tonight, his foot was moving constantly under the table. Later that night, when Mark was in the shower, Kizzy's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. She hesitated, then opened it. "Stay away from him before it's too late." Keezy's hand went cold. There was no name, no explanation, just those chilling words. She quickly typed back, "Who is this? What do you mean?" But the message didn't deliver. Whoever sent it had blocked her immediately. The sound of the shower stopped, and Keezy quickly locked her phone, trying to look normal. But inside, her fear was growing. Someone out there wanted to warn her. Someone knew something about Mark. And for the first time, Keezy began to wonder if she was not just dealing with lies, but with danger. Keezy knew she couldn't just sit and wait for the truth to reveal itself. If Mark was hiding something, she had to find out before it was too late. The next morning, she watched him dress for work, humming like nothing was wrong. When he left, she waited 10 minutes before slipping out of the house herself. She kept a safe distance, following his car through the early morning traffic. Mark's office was in the opposite direction, but halfway through the journey, he turned off the main road. Keezy's heart began to race. He drove into a quiet street and parked beside a small cafe. Keezy pulled over 2 cars behind him and watched. A few minutes later, a woman walked out of the cafe and straight into Mark's arms. She looked nothing like a colleague. Her tight red dress and long braids. Mark held her close, whispering something into her ear. Keezy's chest tightened. She couldn't hear their words, but she didn't need to. His hand on the small of the woman's back said enough. They went inside the cafe, and Keezy quickly got out of her car. She walked past the window, pretending to check her phone, but her eyes were fixed on them. Mark was leaning across the table, speaking seriously. The woman nodded, her face pale and anxious. Before Keezy could hear more, the woman glanced toward the window. Their eyes met for the briefest second. The woman froze, her mouth slightly open. Keezy quickly walked away, her heart pounding. Something about that look unsettled her. It wasn't anger or guilt. It was fear. And Keezy knew deep inside that this was only the first step into a truth far darker than infidelity. For the rest of the day, Keezy couldn't shake the image of the woman in the red dress. That fear in her eyes was haunting. 2 days later, Keezy's chance came. She was walking to the market when she saw the same woman standing at the roadside, trying to flag down a tricycle. Without thinking, Keezy approached. "Excuse me," she said softly. The woman turned, instantly recognizing her. Her lips tightened, and she took a step back. "I just want to talk," Keezy said quickly. "Please? I'm Mark's wife." The woman's eyes darted left and right as if checking to see if anyone was watching. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I need to know what's going on," Keezy insisted. "That night you called him. You said someone was coming. What did you mean?" The woman's expression darkened. "I didn't call you. I called him. And you shouldn't have answered." "Why?" Keezy asked, her voice trembling. Because now, the woman looked over her shoulder again. "He'll know you know something. And when he knows that..." A loud honk from a tricycle interrupted her. The woman quickly stepped inside, avoiding Keezy's eyes. "Wait," Keezy called out, but the tricycle was already moving. The woman leaned out just long enough to say, "If you love your life, leave him now." Keezy stood frozen on the roadside, her groceries forgotten. Her mind spun in confusion. Was the woman warning her about Mark? Or was she just trying to scare her away? One thing was certain. This wasn't just about another woman. There was something much bigger and much more dangerous. The warning from the woman in the red dress stayed with Keezy like a shadow. She barely ate that evening, watching Mark move around the house with his usual calmness. When he stepped out to buy suya for dinner, Keezy saw her chance. She went straight to the wardrobe, pushing aside his neatly arranged shirts. She searched through the inner pockets of his jackets, the drawers, even inside his shoes. At first, there was nothing unusual, just receipts, handkerchiefs, and old keys. But then her fingers brushed against something at the very back of the wardrobe, hidden behind a pile of sweaters. It was a small black envelope, sealed. Keezy's heart thumped as she opened it. Inside were photographs. In the first picture, Mark stood beside the woman in the red dress, both of them smiling. But it wasn't a normal smile. It looked forced, almost tense. In the second photo, the woman was alone, sitting at a table in what seemed like the same cafe Keezy had seen. And then came the last photo. It made Keezy's stomach twist. It was the woman again, but this time, she was sitting on a chair, her hands tied, and her eyes wide with terror. There was a date written in black marker at the bottom of the photo, next Friday. Keezy's hands shook as she stuffed the photos back into the envelope. What did that date mean? Was it a warning or a plan? She quickly returned everything to its place, just as she heard Mark's footsteps approaching. By the time he walked in holding a warm paper bag of suya, Keezy was seated on the bed, pretending to scroll through her phone. But inside, her fear had turned into something else, determination. She needed answers, and she needed them before Friday. Thursday evening, Keezy couldn't sit still. The date written on that photograph, next Friday, was tomorrow. Whatever was going to happen, she needed to know before it was too late. When Mark left the house after dinner, claiming he was going to meet a client, Keezy slipped on her hoodie and followed him again, staying several cars behind. The roads grew quieter as they drove farther from the city lights. Mark eventually turned into a lonely street lined with abandoned warehouses. Keezy parked at a safe distance and crept closer on foot, hiding behind shadows. She spotted him entering a dimly lit building. Moments later, another man joined him, a tall figure in a leather jacket. They spoke for a while, but from where Keezy stood, she couldn't hear their words. Then she saw her. The woman in the red dress was inside, sitting at a table. But this time, her hair was messy, her face pale, and her hands were trembling. Keezy's chest tightened. Something about the scene felt wrong, too controlled, too secretive. Suddenly, the tall man glanced toward the entrance, his eyes scanning the darkness. Keezy quickly ducked behind a stack of crates. She held her breath, her heart pounding, so hard she thought they might hear it. When she peeked again, the tall man was speaking into a phone, his expression serious. Mark was pacing, looking restless. Keezy knew she had to leave before they saw her. But just as she turned to go, a low voice whispered right behind her. Looking for something? Keezy froze. She turned slowly and found herself staring into the cold eyes of a stranger she had never seen before, a man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. And he was smiling. The man with the scar stepped closer, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. Keezy's back pressed against the cold metal crate behind her. I'm just lost, she stammered, trying to sound calm. The man chuckled, the sound low and dangerous. Lost? Out here. His eyes scanned her from head to toe. No one comes here by mistake. Keezy forced a shaky smile. I was looking for the main road. I'll just go. But when she tried to move, he blocked her path. His body was tall, broad, and unmoving. Funny, he said slowly. You're watching the wrong people. That's dangerous. Very dangerous. Keezy's heart pounded. I don't know what you're talking about. The man leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. Stay away from Mark. Stay away from the woman. If you don't, you won't see the next Friday. Her throat went dry. She wanted to scream, but her voice wouldn't come. Suddenly, a loud crash came from inside the building. A table had been knocked over. The man turned his head sharply toward the noise. In that moment, Keezy slipped past him and ran. She didn't stop until she reached her car, her lungs burning, her hands trembling so hard she could barely fit the key into the ignition. As she drove off, her mind raced. How did this man know her name? Why was he warning her to stay away from her own husband? By the time she reached home, her fear had grown into something else. Tomorrow was Friday, and whatever was planned for that day, it was something she might not survive. Friday arrived like a storm cloud. Keezy barely slept the night before, replaying the scar-faced man's warning over and over in her mind. By dawn, her decision was made. She wouldn't run. She needed the truth. Mark left the house unusually early. Keezy waited 10 minutes before following, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Instead of heading to his office, Mark drove to the same abandoned warehouse street. Keezy stayed far back, parking where she couldn't be seen. This time, she didn't just watch, she walked straight toward the building, her pulse pounding. She could hear voices inside. Tonight is the last time, Mark was saying. After this, I'm done. You know that's not how it works, the tall man replied coldly. She's already here. Kizzy peered through the crack of the door. Her stomach churned. The woman in the red dress was sitting on the floor, her hands tied, tears streaking her face. Next to her was a black duffel bag, half open. Inside, Kizzy saw stacks of cash and something metallic wrapped in cloth. Mark knelt beside the woman. I told you to keep quiet. Now they think you talked. I can't protect you anymore. Kizzy's breath caught. She stepped back, her heart slamming against her ribs. But in her panic, her shoe scraped against the gravel. The sound echoed in the silence. Mark's head snapped toward the doorway. Their eyes met, his filled with shock, hers with fear. Kizzy, he said, standing up slowly. What are you doing here? Behind him, the tall man reached for the black bag. And Kizzy realized she might not be leaving that warehouse alive. Kizzy's heart thudded in her ears as Mark stepped toward her. The tall man's hand was still inside the black bag. You shouldn't be here, Mark said, his voice low but tense. Neither should you, Kizzy shot back. What is this? Who is she? And why is there so much money? The tall man laughed darkly. She knows too much now. Kizzy's eyes darted to the woman in the red dress. Her lips trembled as she whispered, He's not who you think he is. Mark's face hardened. Shut up, he barked at her before turning to Kizzy. I did this for us. For money. For a better life. Kizzy shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. Better life? This is kidnapping, Mark. Before the tall man could move, police sirens wailed in the distance. Kizzy's phone was still in her pocket. She had sent her location to her cousin just before entering. In seconds, the warehouse was flooded with flashing lights and shouting officers. The tall man tried to run, but was tackled. Mark stood frozen, his hands raised, staring at Kizzy like he didn't recognize her. The woman in the red dress was freed, sobbing with relief. As Mark was led away in handcuffs, Kizzy's chest felt heavy, not with anger, but with the weight of betrayal. The man she had loved was gone, replaced by someone she never truly knew. That night, Kizzy sat alone in her living room, the phone that started it all lying silent on the table. Like they say, secrets have a way of destroying everything around them. No matter how much we think we know someone, truth will always reveal itself, sometimes in the most painful way. Trust is not just given, it must be earned and guarded. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more shocking life stories like this one. Thanks for watching.